Drop it. All right, welcome to the show. Adrienne Lawrence and Dan Evans here with you. We are about to have a show, so let's do it. Let's get started with the first story. We ready? All right, so Pete Buttigieg continues his bad faith attacks on various progressives, specifically Bernie Sanders, and that's the wrong B-roll. So let's wait for a minute until we get the right B-roll and we'll continue the story. So Pete Buttigieg continues his bad faith attacks on Bernie Sanders, and he claims that Sanders is taking super PAC money, but that's actually not the case at all. He's taking PAC money from progressive organizations, but the way that Pete Buttigieg is fundraising makes it appear as though Bernie Sanders is being corrupted by corporate PACs. So Buttigieg came under fire from progressives after claiming in a series of tweets Thursday evening that his rival for the 2020 Democratic presidential nomination, Senator Bernie Sanders, is being backed by 9 dark money groups and likening the Vermont senator to billionaire Michael Bloomberg. So here's what he wrote in a series of tweets, by the way, and it was his attempt at fundraising. He said, but here's the reality. With Michael Bloomberg in the race and with 9 dark money groups supporting Bernie Sanders, the goalposts have changed. Now, some of the organizations that have backed Bernie Sanders have responded, including the Sunrise Movement, which gave Pete Buttigieg a very simple message. Say our names, Pete Buttigieg, we dare you, which I particularly enjoy. Also, the 9 groups, as the Democratic Socialists of America pointed out in a tweet, are grassroots organizations powered by people of color, immigrants, youth, working class people, and democracy defenders. And here's what that tweet looked like. It was a list of all of the different groups that support Bernie Sanders, all of which support disenfranchised Americans. So what do you guys think about this? There's a lot of bad faith actors out there putting forward a lot of bad faith attacks on people who are trying to do good in the world. We would know a lot about that. So just wanted to get your thoughts on what's going on.
Right, I'm currently wondering if by organizations of color, is that what Pete Buttigieg accidentally meant by dark money? Like that time he flubbed that statement when he was referring to money of unspecified origin, which has been talked about a lot on this show, the role of money in politics. But it's funny that Pete Buttigieg says that Bernie has moved the goalposts when like Pete Buttigieg is the king of moving the goalposts. He moved the goalposts with Medicare for all, making it Medicare for all who want it. And he's moving the goalposts on dark money. He originally ran saying that he wasn't going to take this suspicious like corporate money. He at least like changed the terms versus corporate money versus super PAC money. It's all muddied now, barely means anything anymore. But like Pete has turned around on that and is taking as many corporate donors as he can. We called him Wine Cave Pete for a reason.
And it's funny because when you just were trying to explain it and you were saying money of unknown origin, I really thought you were going to say money of color. And that really had me in that moment because we know Pete Buttigieg kind of struggles between dark money and black money. But anyway.
And also struggles with black people, but yes.
Oh, very true. Yeah, that'd be it. I think that this is all kind of a reflection of that. The fact that he's not winning in what would be a fair way by addressing issues that he has with communities of color, or more or less issues they have with him, and his failure to acknowledge his problems, so to speak, and really kind of just going low and really trying to knock down Bernie as opposed to addressing the actual facts and what we have going on. And it just seems like he's almost conceding the fact that he's not doing as well by virtue of the fact that he's really just making this a nonsense statement and trying to attribute it to Bernie Sanders' campaign.
Yeah, I mean, he's ripping a page out of the neoliberal playbook. This is the way that they operate. They don't have policy proposals that are popular with the people. They don't have a message that resonates with people. He doesn't have the ability to plant the seeds for a movement that matters. And so he just has to play dirty politics and prey on the vulnerable to spread his nonsense propaganda that's easily debunkable, and that's what we're talking about right here. Now, I think that there could be a fair discussion about whether candidates should take PAC money, period, right? Whether it's a non-corporate PAC or corporate PACs. Corporate PACs certainly are much worse, considering the corruption that comes along with it, the inherent corruption. But I could argue the same when it comes to other non-corporate PACs as well. So I think that's fair game, but he's purposely coming from a place of dishonesty here, and people have called him out, and I'm grateful that that happens, because far too often the truth never comes out and people get painted in an unfair way. So.
Yeah, and if I could speak, like, this is yet another in a series of instances in which the Pete Buttigieg campaign has been very mistruthful. I do love to dwell on it because I will make this the hill I die on. The thing about Pete Buttigieg, he constantly claims he has black support, he doesn't. Never mind the thing I've harped on about where he faked black support in South Bend when the people of color in South Bend really don't like the way that he handled things as mayor. Never mind the Douglas plan where he lied about people's names being on it that were black who supported his plan for racial justice that neither provided racial justice or was even endorsed by those people. And even recently this week, he said that Keegan-Michael Key of Key and Peele fame endorsed him when all he was doing was going to a get out to vote event for him. He's this desperate to show that he has support that isn't there. And it's the pattern that I wanted to point at, because this is how he would govern as president. He would promise these things and then immediately turn behind your back with the same can't speak Spanish smile and just lie to the people.
Look, I know that I'm Armenian, but I get it. I'm blonde, I have light skin, so I feel weird making this comment as a white-looking woman, right? But I just hate the way race politics is discussed in the horse race. I think that it makes people feel like nothing more than objects that need to be won or obtained. And like, even well-meaning people on the left, when they're running, like whether it's congressional races or this presidential race, people are people, they have lives, they have unique experiences and worldviews. Like the way that Pete Buttigieg especially, just kind of wants to own people for his campaign or pretend like people are supporting him or endorsing him, it's gross. All of it is gross. And I hate the way that the horse race is discussed in the media by these candidates. These are people. So how about instead of pretending like certain people endorse you, why don't you actually address the very real issues that were in your own hometown, or I shouldn't say hometown, but your own small town that you were the mayor of?
No, exactly. Right? And I completely and totally appreciate the point you make, because essentially you can tell when a candidate does not have good relations necessarily with a group, because they essentially treat that group, number one, like it's a monolith.
Right.
But number two, like I just need to get like your head liaisons, and that means you all are gonna support me, as opposed to getting to know the issues that impact us on a daily basis and leaving room for us to have our own individuality and nuances as well. And it's remarkable how so many individuals want leadership positions, yet they haven't even tried to figure out what are the issues important to the people they want to lead.
And I think the Democratic Party has taken the black vote for granted over and over and over again. And so I don't think that the African American community is a monolith, and I certainly don't buy the narrative that bad faith actors like Candace Owens tries to push, right? But I do think that for the very honest critique of the Democratic Party and how they haven't actually served the unique obstacles for African Americans in America, that's legitimate. That's a legitimate critique, legitimate concern, something that should be addressed, and it shouldn't just be something to exploit for political gain during an election. All right, well, let's move on to, let's move from one disappointing politician to the next, and there's a plethora of them. So Warren happens to be one, so let's discuss. All right.
Into a nomination or to be president of the United States. I don't think any billionaire ought to be able to do it, and I don't think people who suck up to billionaires in order to fund their campaigns ought to do it.
That's Elizabeth Warren talking a big talk during the debate that took place, I believe in Iowa, but it was recent. It was early February when she made those statements. And she even went further to attack and be dishonest about other opponents and what they're accepting in PAC money. But before we get to that, let me just give you the big update to this story. She's now taking PAC money, and she's defending her decision to do so. So according to CNBC, Senator Elizabeth Warren revised her position on rejecting super PAC support as she seeks a comeback in the Democratic presidential primary. A super PAC backing Warren called Persist PAC, obviously this is a PAC specifically for her, filed paperwork with the Federal Election Commission on Tuesday. The group immediately began airing television ads in Nevada showing former President Barack Obama praising the senator. And that makes a lot of sense because there are literally hundreds of former Obama officials who have endorsed Elizabeth Warren and now some of whom work on her campaign. And this is a little bit of an issue. There's the hypocrisy component to it, of course, but we also don't know who's funding this political action committee. The group has spent $1.7 million on television advertisements in Nevada and South Carolina, and that's according to the Medium buying, an ad buying firm. The super PAC's donors will not be publicly disclosed until after Nevada and South Carolina host their nominating contest this month. And I want to give you Warren's justification for doing this, but before I do so, I just want to again remind you of what she claimed of other candidates.
I heard everyone here talking about, as Democrats, we all want to overturn Citizens United because we want to end this unlimited spending. Yeah, except everyone on this stage, except Amy and me, is either a billionaire or is receiving help from PACs that can do unlimited spending.
So again, a lot of criticism there toward others on that stage. And the way that she worded it was meant to be dishonest. Obviously, Bernie Sanders is not a billionaire, but he accepts money from PACs, not corporate PACs. And at that time, so was Elizabeth Warren. There was no difference between what Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren were doing. Just want to make that clarification. Before I jump into her defense of taking PAC money, I wanted to get your thoughts.
See, I don't know whether this is a reflection of the fact that maybe she realizes that she needs this money to go forward. So it almost makes me think of the movie Doctor Strange, where the Ancient One, it turned out that she was channeling power from the dark side to make it happen. Where you're kind of like, well, however it gets done, I guess. Like maybe she just hit a shoulder shrugs, but definitely the hypocrisy is there. But I guess at least she acknowledged it. So
Dan, I wanted to ask you about when Warren rejected taking money from big dollar donors, right? She's like, I'm not gonna do these fundraisers. I'm not gonna have the wine cave fundraisers like Pete Buttigieg does. The DNC was very displeased because the DNC needed her to raise money for the party. And so she agreed that she would not fundraise on her behalf, but she would continue fundraising for the DNC. I felt that distinction made little difference and it showed like a level of dishonesty that I was concerned about. And then now everything that I believed or suspected has come to fruition. But I know I'm framing it in a way to make you answer, and I don't mean to do that. I wanted to get your thoughts. Am I being unfair to her here?
No, I mean I think you have to look at this in a number of different perspectives. Like there's the fact that the race is very heated and Warren's not doing very well. So like the gloves are off. There is the fact that environmentally speaking, as far as like the political environment, the fact that Bloomberg and Steyer are like ramping up all these advertisements is making it so all of these networks can charge more for their ad space. So people like Bernie Sanders, people like Elizabeth Warren, who have flavors of grassroots campaigning by their side, grassroots money, are having to spend more of that regular people's, teachers, doctors' money on these ads just to compete in the same ad space as Bloomberg. So there are these environmental factors, but still, I think the best way the Democrats can run an election is by as cleanly as possible expressing that they're the anti-corruption party. And when you get into these kind of issues where it's very clear that Warren went back on her word a year ago to now, I mean, a lot of candidates made the bet, especially Pete Buttigieg, that you could say a bunch of stuff on the campaign trail and it wouldn't matter because once all eyes are on you, we can run with that and we'll take over the country and like win the moderates. But that's not true. We have the internet. We can look back to see what happens. And so every kind of misstep or switch in behavior is going to be looked back on as a judgment on how trustworthy you are to govern. And if Democrats are trying to run against the most corrupt person we've ever had as president, and the waters are muddied around this person's integrity, it's not a winning strategy. So I am very concerned in that sense.
So do you almost think like that by means necessary is maybe where she is right now, because primarily Bloomberg stepping in and doing so well?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And maybe, just to play devil's advocate, she feels backed into a corner and feels that this is the only way that she has a shot. But I think one thing that she needs to really consider is what this type of messaging does to the Democratic voters, or what it communicates to Democratic voters. Because now more than ever, young voters especially want someone who's consistent and someone who will not waver on their values. And what this communicates is that she's willing to waver for political gain. Now, the situation is terrible because the DNC has empowered and emboldened someone like Bloomberg to run and spend unlimited amounts of money. He's a billionaire on these ads, and so it's difficult, but there remains one candidate who's refused to take any type of corporate PAC money. And to be clear, we don't know yet who's funding this PAC. We don't know where the money's coming from because we won't find out until after South Carolina. But this is it's a frustrating situation, I get it. But if Bernie Sanders can continue being the front runner by only raising money from small dollar donors and non-corporate PACs, I think that if Warren had a compelling message, she could do the same. But instead, she has wavered on her progressive values. That was certainly clear in her Medicare for All proposal.
Right, yeah.
And now with what she's accepting in super PAC money.
I will say this is all making, as being someone who's involved in politics and especially the Democratic side of it, the 2016, the 2020 election has made me more staunchly for overall voting reform. Like not just getting private money out of politics, but publicly funding elections, making sure that Bloomberg can't like Super Bowl ad buy his way to 20% in the polls. Like there's a whole shit. The fact that we even have this difference between, well, there's super PACs, but then there's corporate PACs, and there's these, like, it's all to the regular person, as you're getting to, Anna, is just gonna look like corruption. And that's something that Democrats need to address. This is something that they prioritized in the House. I believe the first bill they passed in the House was like a relatively symbolic, but a measure to enact certain voting level reforms and to go against voter suppression. But this needs to be a big thing, not only for Democrats to reclaim some of the trust they need, but for, quite frankly, Bernie Sanders' agenda to be as successful as it needs to be.
Yes, definitely. So from Warren, there were some justifications. Warren said that the fact that only 2 women didn't have super PAC support was just not right. Okay, that's, again, she's intentionally being dishonest and it's frustrating. So here's where I stand. She says, if all the candidates want to get rid of super PACs, count me in, I'll lead the charge, but that's how it has to be. It can't be the case that a bunch of people keep them and only 1 or 2 don't. And then she says, if all the candidates want to get rid of super PACs, count me in, I'll lead the charge, but that's not how it has to be. It can't be the case where, I read that part. Now, Bernie Sanders, though, let's talk a little bit about where he's at, because she's like, obviously throwing out all sorts of accusations here. But even as CNBC, of all places, reports, Senator Bernie Sanders does not have a declared super PAC backing his bid, although the super PAC connected to the Nurses Union, National Nurses United, which has endorsed Sanders, is supporting him. The group has spent about $400,000 on radio ads. So it's a little different. There's a lot more transparency there. We know where the money's coming from, but nonetheless, she persists. So we gotta take a break. We'll be right back.
We hope you're enjoying this free clip from the Young Turks. If you want to get the whole show and more exclusive content while supporting independent media, become a member at tyt.com/join today. In the meantime, enjoy this free segment.
Hey everyone, welcome back to TYT. Adrienne Lawrence, Dan Evans, and Anna Kasparian with you. Just want to read a few member comments, make a few announcements, and then we'll move on to the rest of our news. In the Super Chats comments, Peter writes in and says, it would be easier for Elizabeth Warren to suspend her campaign and back Bernie. It may be a legitimate path heading towards Super Tuesday. That would, I think, salvage some of her reputation, but I don't think she's gonna do that. I don't think that she has any interest in supporting his candidacy, or certainly not like dropping out or anything like that.
Yeah, I would love to see Warren as the VP still. I think that would work well electorally, but I think there's been a lot of stuff going on between both of them right now that I don't know if it'll be reconcilable between the 2 camps.
Yeah, look, Bernie has gone out of his way to avoid attacking her, and I want him to continue doing that. I don't want him to, and he's bigger than that. Like,
don't take the bait.
Don't take the bait, exactly. Even with all that she's been doing, and it's been so devastating, right? Because she's right on issues, and she has policy proposals that I really like. I don't know why she's going in this direction. It's just such a bad direction to go in. And like, look, coming out and saying, I'm struggling, okay? It's hard with Bloomberg in this race. I don't know what to do. I'm falling behind because of this billionaire who can spend unlimited amounts of money on advertising. That's one thing. But she goes out of her way, even in the context of complimenting Amy Klobuchar, to attack Bernie Sanders with these like ridiculous smears that you can easily debunk. I don't know, it's just, politics is disgusting and it's dirty, and sometimes I feel like it's not even worth it to fight for it. So let's go to TYT Lives. We have Tom Zawacki who says, Pete Buttigieg, billionaires don't have dark money, it's laundered daily. That's a good one. Kara Curley says, damn, Bernie has them all running scared to big money groups. Eddie O'Donnell Rose says, it's finally safe to say definitely that Senator Warren has reneged on the progressive pledge and is maybe mildly progressive, perhaps not progressive at all. And then from our member comments, Rebel Fish says, Wall Street Pete is now pathetically desperate Pete. Time to go back to the wine cave Pete. Gabby Marita says Pete Buttigieg was 100% the sort of kid in high school who went to all teachers' offices when grades came out to whine about how an A- should really be an A. I was kind of that student.
It's all right.
Yeah.
Polyglot Pete.
Yeah, okay, so a few announcements. There is 1 week left to participate in the TYT Dinner in LA sweepstakes. This is a partnership with Aspiration, and what we're trying to do is have dinner with one of you guys who wins the sweepstakes. And we'll fly you out to Los Angeles, put you up in a hotel, and then you get to have dinner with me, Cenk, and John. It'll be awesome. So go to tyt.com/dinnerinla to learn more on how you can enter to win. Also, we will be providing special coverage of the South Carolina debate, primary debate. If you're interested in watching, there will be a number of awesome panelists. You have John Iadarola, Emma Vigeland, Cenk Uygur, and J.R. Jackson. You can watch on all those different platforms you see on your screen: Roku, Zumo, YouTube TV, Pluto, Xfinity, X1, Xfinity Flex. We're all over the place. So Tuesday, February 25th is when the coverage starts, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern. All right, let's move on to the rest of the news. Charles Johnson is a single father who's currently suing Cedars-Sinai Hospital in Los Angeles after his wife died during childbirth. This story is difficult. I'm just warning you guys before we toss to the video. But with that said, here is Charles Johnson explaining what happened to his wife.
I can see the Foley catheter coming from Kira's bedside begin to turn pink with blood.
He says doctors told them now 3-year-old Langston's birth would be a routine cesarean section.
I just held her by her hands. I said, please, look, my wife isn't doing well. And this woman looked me directly in my eyes and she said, sir, your wife just isn't a priority right now. It wasn't until 12:30 a.m. the next morning that they finally made the decision to take Kira back to surgery.
As critical minutes turned into hours, Johnson says he was continually ignored by staff at Cedars-Sinai Hospital in Los Angeles as Kira's health continued to suffer.
When they took Kira back to surgery and he opened her up, there were 3.5 liters of blood in her abdomen from where she had been allowed to bleed internally for almost 10 hours. And her heart stopped immediately.
Such a devastating story, but unfortunately it's not unique or isolated. This is actually a huge problem that is definitely prevalent among the African American community. Now, Charles Johnson told CNN, I started to do research myself. I realized, oh my gosh, we're in the midst of a maternal mortality crisis that isn't just shameful for American standards, it's shameful on a global scale. So to give you a few statistics, America is the only developed country with a rising death rate for pregnant or new mothers. Approximately 700 of these women in the United States die each year. One of the richest countries in the world, and that's what happens. And one of the biggest issues is, much like Kira's case, when a woman needs help, especially a black woman, and says she's in pain or isn't feeling right, oftentimes that call for help will be ignored. And there are serious consequences to that. People literally die.
I think a lot of people forget that the medical community would do experiments on black people for centuries and essentially poke, prod, cut us open with this idea that we don't feel pain. And unfortunately, some of that has continued to press through to modern day medicine and medical care providers who continue to ignore women, and especially Black women, when we let you know there is a problem, there's something I know. And we saw it with Serena Williams and her trying to explain to the doctors, no, I have a problem, there's something going on, and literally having to throw a fit before they actually listen to her. And that it really affects our daily lives and the possibility that we may end up admitted to a hospital in some way or some form, and hey, they're not gonna listen to us even though we're telling them there's something wrong.
Yeah, it's like in the hospital, if we're too hysteric, we don't get any help, or our pain is not treated as important. If we're too hysteric and the cops pull us over, we're dead. Like it's just, it goes to this thing you're saying, it's like, it's difficult just existing in this country as an African American sometimes, because it's like you're walking on eggshells just trying to be treated like a normal person. But like this is such an indictment on the healthcare system that like Republicans and a lot of Democrats are saying is the #1 healthcare system in the world, the one that produces the best outcomes. And this is happening. Cedars-Sinai is a really good hospital.
It is. It's one of the top hospitals. Yes.
Yeah, they're a phenomenal hospital. Like there are doctors who work there who are sure fine, but like this happens in our healthcare system on a day-to-day basis. They'll say like, oh, but other countries, they wait for their care. People die waiting for their care here, and we do nothing about it. But no, God forbid we have socialist Bernie care. That'll ruin things.
No, and something also too, I think is important to note that Blacks, Indigenous, and Alaska Native women are 2 to 3 times more likely to die during childbirth or as a result of pregnancy-related complications than white women. And it's because doctors don't listen to us. And just like a quick story, I went out on a date maybe 6 months ago, first date. I have no problem telling a man I want triplets. The man, his response is, it's probably for the best because of the high maternal mortality rate for Black women. It's the only way just to do it once.
Oh my
because
God.
you can't risk doing it more than once as you may not survive.
It's an excellent pickup line. I'm gonna use that.
Please do, yeah.
Wow. Works anytime apparently.
Good way of breaking up the
oh my God.
depressing
When he
stuff.
said that to me, I was like, oh my God. Like he was down and he knew exactly why and why it was so important.
You want triplets?
Dude, I can only do it once because like if I go into a doctor's office.
Is that the only reason though?
Oh, well that, and they're like cute because they all look the same and you can like switch them up and
They look cute, but there's 3 of them.
I know, but what if one runs away? I have an insurance policy, 2 more, we're good.
Oh my God.
I just always imagine like in middle school, they just like switch them around and no one ever knows who's like, oh wait, is this the twin who's in class today or did one of them playing hooky? It's a sitcom waiting to happen. Sorry, I needed light in this story.
No,
that Adrienne wants triplets.
We did need that, but let me give you a few more facts about this. It's a broader look at what's going on. So there's a nonprofit that does research and activism in the field, and they came to more devastating, unfortunately, conclusions on this. Every Mother Counts says many of their deaths are because of unequal healthcare or the unequal healthcare system and systemic racism. Also, an expert in the field added, a well-educated African-American woman with more than a high school education has a 5-fold risk of death compared to a white woman with less than a high school education. So look, that might feel like a weird thing to bring up, but I think it's incredibly relevant because oftentimes when we talk about unfair treatment, it's seen through the lens of socioeconomic status, and that certainly plays a huge role. But even if you have 2 people with the same education, the same wealth, the same everything, there's still a problem in the way that people are perceived, certain groups of people are perceived. And so I want to plug this, even though I have issues with some of their reporting, but the New York Times wrote a very detailed feature on how Black women are most vulnerable to this. And it was just really well done. So please check that out. It was a good piece. And there are good reporters working at organizations that I don't necessarily agree with all the time. So take a look at that article and more. And we're gonna take a quick break. We'll be right back.